Right, well, we'll make a bit of a start, but as I said, if everyone can keep themselves on mute, that would be fantastic. Use the chat box to either ask questions, but particularly I'm really interested in people kind of contributing their own views through the chat box. I'm suspecting we're all going to have quite a lot of experience of our topic today. So it'll be really interesting, and we do try and capture the chat box. We'll try and create a bit of output from this. There's Ian asking about my shirt. Sorry, I've gone a bit sensible today, Ian. It's virtually all white, which is a bit unusual for me, but thanks for mentioning it, Ian. Thanks for the comment. Well, welcome to our session today. So my name is Gareth. I'm one of the directors of First Intuition. I'm joined today by my colleague Crystal and a fabulous lineup of speakers and panelists for our March Leadership Lunch and Learn on managing remote teams and colleagues working at least partially at home, something which seems like it will probably be with us now permanently. I think even once we're through the restrictions of the COVID pandemic, I think it's fair to say the genie is out of the bottle now. And that I think a degree of remote working is likely to be a factor of probably most of our lives going forward. And in fact, I don't know if anyone's noticed the date. Today is the 16th of March, and it's actually a year to the day, if you remember, since the UK entered the first lockdown. We didn't plan that deliberately. And it's been a year, I think, of Groundhog Days, sitting in the same place on the same laptop, little travel, minimal face-to-face meetings. In fact, it was about a year ago that a colleague mentioned to me some newfangled platform that I had literally never even heard of at this point, Zoom. And now, back-to-back Zooms, social Zoom beers, daily Zoom fatigue are an integral part of my life. I mean, can you imagine what would it have been like if this had all happened 20 or 30 years ago when we all had Nokias, which were about capable of that? Remember that snakes game on Nokias? I mean, can you imagine the problems we'd have been having communicating a couple of decades ago? But it's been such a different year. I mean, I've literally only been into one of my offices twice in the last year. I've only seen 6 of my colleagues face to face in a year. I've got 25 new colleagues who I have no idea how tall they are because they've joined us during the lockdown. Now, it's a year in which, I think it's fair to say we've all learned a huge amount. We've learned how quickly whole businesses, whole industries even, could switch to working at home. We've all learned to pivot. We've learned that furlough isn't anything to do with horse racing. We've learned how to multitask, although maybe forgotten how to focus. We've learned how to build strong relationships with people we've never met. We've learned that an organization's ability to deal with extreme stress is built not on its offices, but on its people. We've learned that the thing we miss most is each other. I remember when remote meant the Galapagos Islands or Outer Mongolia, not my own kitchen. Remote working can bring many benefits, joys even, but it brings as many challenges, particularly for managers used to working face-to-face with their teams, onboarding, engagement, training, building relationships, mentoring, motivating, inspiring even, all very different in a remote environment. Now, as I've said, all of us, we'll all have our experiences of the ups and downs of remote collaboration over the last year. So I'd really encourage you all, as we're discussing things over the next hour and a half, please make contributions through the chat box to the questions that our panel are answering. I for one will be really interested to see your own thoughts and your own tips and hints on how you have found things. But I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Crystal Haygreen. Crystal led the development of our leadership and management programs and is deeply involved in ongoing conversations with a lot of the clients we work with about the kind of critical interpersonal skills that are important for leaders to successfully fulfill positions of responsibility, particularly when it's responsibility for others in their teams. So, Crystal, I'll hand over to you.
Lovely, thanks Gareth. Good afternoon everyone. Great to see so many of you joined us this afternoon. So thank you for coming along. It's well, we're all working remotely currently, or most of us are, so we know this is a really popular topic. I think for me, I worked from home for a long time, but I still used to have quite a lot of travel, and I was in the minority working from home in our organisation. So things have really changed for me over the last year, despite still being in the position of working from home. I now have all of my colleagues, an increased level of communication, much more inclusion in what's going on, and involved in much more in the business than what I was before. So for me, there's been some huge benefits to take from the remote working. But as Gareth was saying, sort of missing colleagues, not seeing people face to face has definitely been a real challenge. And I guess things are going to be changing as lockdown lifts. We start going back to some of the old norms, some of the ways of working. What I'm really interested to see is how we're going to navigate through this next phase of this situation, this next 12 months, because I'm definitely far from certain as to how things are going to look by the end of this year. So I'm just going to share a poll with you, just a few questions to, if you wouldn't mind answering, just to give us an idea as to the situation that you were all in your organisations before the pandemic, over the last sort of 12 months, how the working situation has looked, and where you think it's going to be by the end of this year, when hopefully we have a lift on all the restrictions and we're back to perhaps some of the old ways of working. So we've got quite a few of you there, sort of no home working before, with obviously a lot during, and it's quite interesting to see, as you're all answering there, quite a lot of you are foreseeing that there is going to be a level of remote working as we get to the end of this year. So I'm just going to give it a few more minutes because a few of you are still.
Probably one of the things I've heard a lot, Crystal, actually, is, a lot of the, partners, directors of organisations we work with who actually say that pre-pandemic, they didn't think home working actually would work. And they would want people in the office 5 days a week. They'd want that visibility, that, I guess, control, collaboration, team, but they just didn't think home working was actually viable, and actually suddenly realizing, actually, it's got huge benefits, and actually it's not been half as hard as we expected. I mean, we flipped to fully virtual literally overnight last March, and I was so surprised how smoothly it actually went.
Definitely. I think those things that we didn't think that we could do remotely, actually, well, this Zoom has enabled not only for us to do those things, but also to do perhaps a lot more than what we used to in terms of collaborative working, where people are in different places. So let's have a look and see the results as to how we're looking. So very few working from home sort of before the pandemic, 71% no working from home at all. Few still working from in the office for some of the time, but 76% at the start of this year. So at the start of this year when we were in lockdown. And interesting to see there where we're looking at going, or where people's expectations are for the end of this year. So 52% expecting to be having 2 days a week working from home. So that 2 to 3 days a week seems like what people think the situation might be going forward. So the last question I asked there was about productivity. So how do you think working from home has had an impact on productivity for your teams and your staff? So interestingly, 49% saying that productivity was at a similar level to what it was before. So that really is good news. 29% looking at it being more productive working from home. That's something which personally I can definitely appreciate. I have been much more productive losing all of that travel time that I had before. And there are an element there, 22% looking at less productive. It would be interesting if anyone wants to pop in the chat if you were identifying that it was less productive. Is that down to the role or and the ability to be able to do the job from home? But thank you very much for that. Let me lose that from the screen. So I'm really excited about this session that we've got planned for you today. We've got some fantastic guests who are going to share their insights and their experiences. We've got a panel of experts with plenty of experience that Gareth will introduce you to a little bit later. But to start with, we're really lucky to be joined by CJ Green. She's the chair of the New Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership and the co-founder and executive director of Brave Goose, who specialise in HR challenges. And I'm sure she's going to be able to give us some really great knowledge and experiences that she's going to share with us. So I will hand over to you, CJ.
Thank you, Crystal. I did that thing where I leave my mouse hovering over the unmute button so I don't forget to unmute, and that the first thing you all have to do is go, CJ, you're on mute, because that's hideous. But it's really, really wonderful to be with you today. As Crystal said, I'm CJ Green. I'm co-founder of Brave Goose. We're here talking hybrid teams, but our focus is actually not going to be on kind of working remotely through a crisis, which is what we've all been doing for the last year. Now it's about, we're going to have this kind of strange dynamic of a couple of things going on at the same time, and how do we navigate that, and kind of some tips and tricks. And we really want high-performing hybrid teams, not a kind of two-tier workforce, which is what we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to flick up my, for those of you who don't know kind of Brave Goose, we feel really passionately about unlocking people potential, and we do that through a couple of different ways. Amazing development and coaching programs for organisations, and also we have a tech platform called Clever Goose. We love our geese, and that is about unlocking potential in managers who are dealing with gnarly HR issues. So we like to put the kind of gnarly knowledge in the palm of people's hands. So yeah, that's kind of, we're very much about how do we kind of level up the skills of people, for sure, in Brave Goose. So let me stick on my screen for you all. Hopefully you now can see that. So I do love a 10 things kind of when I'm talking to people about, here's 10 things that have really resonated with us in Brave Goose throughout the pandemic, but also we work with some multinational organisations who have worked with hybrid teams for a long time. So we've got some skills and tips and tricks that they use that is useful to think about. What we will be doing as I'm talking is doing some idea generation with you. So don't panic, I'm not going to put anyone on the spot, but if you can head into chat periodically, I'm going to just ask you to have some out loud thinking, have some ideas, because then everyone on this call can share from your knowledge and the things that you're coming up with. So imagine if you walk away today thinking, here's 3 things that we could do that makes hybrid working feel a bit easier. The first one I want to talk about is InSync, and I don't mean some dreadful 90s boy band, but this is about creating practices in your organisation that means those that work from home are in sync with those that are in an office. What we really need to be careful of is avoiding a 2-tier system where some are at home, some are in the office. The people in the office think that that means that they're kind of working harder, or the people at home feel that they're missing out on lots of that connection and collaboration. So thinking about how do we get in sync across this hybrid teams is one of the key priorities, I would say, as we move forward. Now, I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to subject you to my playlist, and I'm sorry for that. But you all have 30 seconds now to think about what thoughts have you had so far about getting hybrid teams in sync? Wonderful. Thank you for those of you that are kind of wading in and contributing. I love that. So this is probably the biggest thing we have on our plates, isn't it, in terms of our focus and consideration. Massive watch out for all of us who are managing people. Paying attention to how connected and engaged people are across our hybrid workforce is extremely important. But it's nothing to be scared of. I mean, it's the same challenges businesses have been kind of facing over the years. You know, it's I've got a head office and satellite offices, and they feel like they're not included. It's we've got some teams that work in an office, but we've got teams who are operational out in the field. There's always been these challenges in workforces. This is just a new layer to it. So don't be frightened of us versus them becoming a big thing. Just get ready with some tactics before we get there, and that kind of can really help. This is my favorite one, actually, and you might have guessed, I'm a bit of a glass half full type of person, but I think for years that we have kind of talked about and had discussions on how do we make the experience of work feel better? How do people feel more connected and like people care about them? How do they feel engaged? Now is a real opportunity for us to pay absolute attention on the experience of work, and this being on a real individual level. Now, I know that feels like, from a manager perspective, gosh, that's a lot of heavy lifting for me, but unfortunately it is. Management skills now need to just shift and level up a little bit, because there's less opportunity for us to just put everyone in a homogenous glob and say we're just going to treat you all the same way and hope for the best out the other side of it. We're going to have some really, you know, the best performing businesses will be the people who have said, I saw my employee and I recognized what could really level them up in performance, and I did some individual work to make that happen. And I think that's quite exciting. So just a kind of another head back into chat, if you will, a bit of a think about kind of how could you give individual experiences to your people. Wonderful, thank you. So kind of individual experience is something kind of quite close to my heart. And one of the ways that is really kind of quite smart is introducing coaching conversations. So skilling your management layers with how to have coaching conversations rather than transactional, I'm giving you work and then I kind of exit this interaction with you. Coaching conversations play a huge part in how people who are working in a hybrid model will succeed. And this really focuses on the individual needs of your teams. So rather than just having that transactional work orientated discussion, encourage reflection, have some emphasis around, you know, how's motivation for you? How do you think you can improve your motivation? Because those of us who know it can be quite hard sometimes, if you're either in an office feeling unmotivated because you are so distracted you can't get anything done, or at home feeling like I'm not included, so I'm lacking motivation because I don't feel part of something extraordinary. So as ever, I do like to give some kind of things that we've seen working and work. In Brave Goose, we have something called the Elephant's Backpack. Now, I don't know if you have come across Miro boards, but if you haven't come across them, go hunt them out, because they are the most exceptional tool for remote working and connecting with people, because they're a really different way of engaging, and bluntly, they're awesome. So we have a Miro board that we call the Elephant's Backpack. And at the end of every week, we have a discussion on our Elephant's Backpack, and it's about sharing reflections on the week, or a project that's been really important. And it's about kind of capturing key things for us. So what's our great moments from the week been? What are we really struggling with? What have we got on our plate next week that we really need the team to have attention to, or just that we want to have a conversation about it? And we've even got a box in our elephant's backpack called "This is awkward, but I need to say it." And so that flushes out some of that kind of, this could be the stuff that derails us as a team because I'm in a remote environment or I'm not in a connected environment with you, and I'm feeling a sense of frustration on things that you might not know. So it allows us to have a really safe, psychologically safe place to have that conversation and sort of flush that out loud, which is really helpful. This one for sure is the wonderful thing about moving to a new way of working is this a prime opportunity to involve your people in the discussion on how you're going to do it. So creating ground rules together, I mean, ground rules is an awful term, but creating that kind of how are we going to do stuff around here now can really build a strong sense of team with your people, and because they're part of creating this new future now. So think about things like, how do we want to communicate around here? How can we use blended platforms and not just have your people sat churning emails day in, day out? You know, what is the stuff that's going to create tension? You know, the like, this is awkward, but I need to say it. So create stuff together. The more involved your people are in shaping this new future, the easier it will feel. But don't be afraid to twist and test. Like, that's part of the kind of excitement of what we're about to face. There are going to be some things that just don't work very well. The Brady Bunch boxes. So I read a fantastic Harvard Business Review article that talked about the fact that there is something really leveling about having everyone appear in a Zoom meeting. So whilst we're all desperate to get into workplaces and be connected and together and see people again, if you've got half a meeting in a room and half a meeting somewhere else, that is not a leveling experience for anyone. You want people to feel connected to the conversation. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried to dial into a room where everyone else is there and you're not. It's a lot of listening to nonsense chatter, which doesn't feel very focused. And there's always some irritating dude shuffling papers. So like, level the experience for everyone. If you've got some people online, get it all online, and it's just easier to cope with. One of the things that we also do, and we stole this idea from someone else, it's called How To Me, and it's a how-to guide for new starters about each team member. So again, we use Miro board for this, and the team fills in different boxes like, this is the stuff I really like, this is the stuff I hate. This is how I'm my most productive. So I'm a morning person. I really love to get kind of a certain amount of tasks done in the morning. I really get quite resentful if I have to work like into the evenings when it's my family time. So it's an opportunity to say, this is kind of your how-to guide to me and interacting with me. And a new starter can get a sense of the team that they're coming into, but also gets to say, you know, that like, this is what makes me tick, and get to know me in a different way. Which is really helpful. And again, I'm going to pause there and just kind of, let's head to chat for like a few seconds, reflections on what are the top tips and tricks that you've come up with for kind of new starters, really, because that is really tricky to get people to get to know us. Great stuff, thank you. So my numbers seem to be, but like my next one, my next one is working asynchronously. So if we are really honest with ourselves, being truly hybrid and giving honest flexibility, working asynchronously is a reality for us all. And that may mean that one team member is far more productive in the evening and one team member is the opposite. And how do you have that kind of performance if worlds don't collide? So managing that by doing things like videoing meetings and giving access to recordings, that's really helpful way of making sure that they're included. we came across one company, they send out prepared agendas in advance of meetings, so colleagues can choose if that meeting is important and relevant for them to attend. Because sometimes we're in meetings thinking, why on earth am I doing this with my time, when I could just read a summary of it and actually I could be far more productive. So giving options that mean your colleagues can choose if it's valuable to be there, if they have something to contribute. If it's just an information update, they can watch it at another time. And it's about kind of us thinking really differently about the way that we do the world of work now. It removes unnecessary pressure, and it does some of that, you know, we've felt a bit kind of stacked up in the pandemic. It's like we're all online proving we're working really hard, but actually it's a way of getting the world of work kind of done. It's about being productive, but in the best way for you. So you might be someone who gains loads of energy from meetings, or you might feel like I just needed to kind of have a snapshot of what happened and I can move on. And that's all fine. And we're going to have to get used to this, where people are not colliding in the same way. My final one is, this is probably the most exciting, positive chance to experiment that we have ever had in the world of work. A hybrid workforce is a huge opportunity for us to do the world of work differently. But managers, apologies for my dog, managers have to think about how they curate information for their people. So this isn't about how you just have a one-size-fits-all. It's about what are the layers you have, what are you curating for your people that means that they can check in and out with it in a way that really aids and guides their performance. So I will come off slide share now and hand back, I think, to Gareth.
Thank you so much, CJ. Some really fascinating ideas there. I love your list of 10, and I'm sure the accountants would have spotted that there were. That
was awkward.
But one day I would love to see your list of your top 10 lists of top 10. Yeah. I think that would be really fascinating. But I particularly love that thing about the Brady Bunch boxes. I mean, it's I think a dilemma of do you try and blur a physical and virtual meeting, which I just don't think will work. I think it's either got to be everyone in the room or everyone on Zoom. And I think, you know, that has some logistical implications in offices. You know, I can't see people sitting at their desks on Zoom on different Zoom meetings. That would just be too disruptive. So, you know, maybe creating spaces, small cubby holes that people can retreat to join a Zoom meeting from the office with their colleagues who are elsewhere. And, you know, I think things we're probably gonna have to think about, but fantastic. Thank you so much, CJ, really, really fascinating. Well, we're now going to hear some, you know, very practical ideas from our panel, which Crystal is going to be chairing. We're very delighted to be joined. We've got Louise from Green King, we've got Carolyn from the Chartered Management Institute, the CMI, we've got Den from ARM and Simon from AstraZeneca. So I'm going to hand over to Crystal to chair the discussion, although I suspect, you can't keep me quiet for too long, I suspect I may chip in with my own thoughts and questions, but this particularly is as Crystal is taking our panelists through their thoughts on some questions. Please feel free, everyone, you know, chip in your own contributions. We're already seeing some excellent content in the chat box, which we will grab and gather for putting together after this, but I'll hand over to you, Crystal.
Lovely, thank you. CJ, I really liked what you talked about there about making these two worlds collide and allowing people to work in different ways, creating those opportunities. I thought that was a really great insight. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, as Gareth said, we've got a great panel with us, and thank you to those of you who sent questions through in advance. Hopefully we're going to cover off all of those topics that you raised. To start with, I'd really like to ask Dennis to introduce himself. So Dennis is from ARM, and I know that Dennis has got quite a lot of experience already working with global teams. So remote working certainly isn't something that's new, but it'd be really great to hear about some of the challenges that have been faced, and perhaps a bit about kind of the challenges faced with onboarding where there's been restrictions on travel and that.
Yeah, sure. And it was kind of funny we had the mute experience out of the way, because that has to be the phrase of 2020, 2021 is you're on mute. And I'm sure we'll hear it again before we're done. Yeah, this has been a really interesting experience for me, and I have to say, CJ, you had some really good insights there. That was really useful. I mean, I'm learning this as much as everyone else is, no question about it. And I can't really say I know anything more about where this is going than anyone else. It's quite interesting when we have team meetings. It's a constant question we get. The teams want to know where this is going, what their lives are going to be like. And we don't really have the answers now. All we can really say is we're listening, and we're working things out as we go. But yeah, no, I had some experience with running teams before this, so I've always kind of managed a global team. And in fact, for some time, I was actually based in APAC, running a predominantly European and American team. And so I'm used to kind of, having a lot of the experiences people are getting now around, people dialing in, people being, I've always had remote teams, and having to deal with the time zones and so forth, and having to deal with, for other people outside your time zone, the hours are different, and your evenings and mornings are free game for them. So I don't know about other people, but my days are certainly extended now. I think one of the biggest things that really resonated with what CJ was saying, that I certainly saw before this, but I see more of now, is including people. You're either in the room or you're not. And I'm sure most of us do work with some very, very intelligent, articulate people. And I know when I would have Asian people on the discussion, in particular, the Asians have a much more reserved kind of personality. And, I know as a leader, I had to actively be involved in trying to manage that meeting and make sure that their people are included. And you develop an instinct of going, hold on, that the Asian team haven't actually spoke for 15 minutes. And you have to go, hold on, what's your opinion? You have to be more involved in kind of managing the meeting. And your role in terms of participation versus managing it and getting the best out of the group, you kind of have to for me, certainly, I had to rebalance it towards making sure I was spending a lot of time getting the best out of that group, rather than necessarily participating in that discussion. So, and as we moved to Zoom and to online meetings, as I said, I was kind of used to the online component of it, but it's actually that level playing field is a huge impact. I think that's been a massive benefit. We've got people who are quite intelligent, but they're maybe not as outspoken, or they're a bit more introvert, who really need to participate in the discussion. They might find it kind of difficult before, but now, as you say, because we're all kind of on the screen, it's much more level playing field. So that's been one of the really positive things. But I think the biggest area that I've got a challenge is what you mentioned around onboarding. Half the team, I've got a direct team of about 30 people at the moment. I think probably a third of them I've never met face to face. And that's been a real challenge. I mean, it's kind of interesting, and it's different for different people. I think the younger generations have really cottoned on to this, and they're off and away. They get it. They're waiting for me to catch up. For other people, you've got to spend more time on it. It's really highlighted for me how much the personal networks build up your ability to do your job. In ARM, personal networks are a big deal. So we're having to implement a lot of things to help people build their networks. A lot of coffee mornings, a lot of impromptu things. I go out of my way, certainly, to invite people to meetings a lot more than I used to. So don't have any magic silver bullet to it. It's a lot of effort to try to get people involved in discussions more.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. The sort of everyone's in the room, but in some ways Zoom makes it easier to hide and not be involved. And then for some people, I feel like I know much more and get much more out of them now, because Zoom has enabled them to have that voice that perhaps they were not giving before. But yes, certainly something that we have to be able to manage. Definitely. You mentioned there about those kind of social interactions, and I know Louise, who we have with us, Louise, I'll get you to introduce yourself, what your role is at Green King, but we've talked about those opportunities for engagement and social interactions. So it would be great for you to share. I know there's been some great work going on at Green King. It'd be great for you to share what you've been doing.
Thanks, Crystal. Yes, I work at Green King and I have a variety of teams. So I have some transactional teams that are credit control focused, and I also have some management accounts teams. And it's night and day between the two as to how they've coped with working from home during lockdown, particularly the latter lockdown. So the management accounts team have thrived. They absolutely love the flexibility that this brings to them, particularly during preparing the management accounts during what we refer to as week one. They've got they don't have to work late and then commute home. They're at home already, and that's a big motivator for them, and they've loved it. They're not so hot on worrying about the social side of things. They're fine. I don't need to make efforts. It feels a little disingenuous to force them to do something they don't want to do. They're absolutely working well, and I don't want to go along all bells ringing for something they don't need. Now, my transactional teams, they really enjoy more of the socialising side, and they've also found it quite difficult, particularly in this latter lockdown, to cope with how demotivating it is, just because they're not getting the natural highs that their jobs bring. So as a credit controller, if you are able to collect a significant sum of money, usually in the office there'd be high fives and well done, and they're just not getting that at the moment because of the situation that's out there for publicans. So we have to focus a little bit more on their motivation, and it's intrinsically linked to their engagement. You can't separate the two as far as I'm concerned. So some of it's around reinforcement. Why do we think we work for such a good company? What do we really enjoy about this? And sometimes just saying it out loud helps remind you of those sorts of things, but also have some open and honest conversations about what would make it better, what would make it better for you as an individual, because that way you're demonstrating that you are truly interested in their opinions, and also what the future looks like for everybody, rather than just the treading water situation we're in at the moment. So we have lots of meetings as well with different teams. We sometimes mix the teams up, where we have it just as you're not allowed to talk about work. So actually what you probably do in the office is one of you goes and makes a coffee and you have a little bit of a chat in the kitchen as well. We now sort of say, yeah, it's fine to have just friendly catch-ups, talk about what you want to. No one's forced to speak if they don't want to. A lot of it revolves around TV because we've not got an awful lot else going on, have we all? But it brings some good conversations, and it's nice to engage with people on a personal level as well.
I think that's something I definitely miss about my colleagues, because they are my friends as well. And yeah, those chats that you just have in the office, and finding new ways in which to recreate those, it's definitely been something we've had to work on.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a sense of belonging as well. We're trying to breed a family-based environment. That's one of our cultural things at Green King. So you talk with your family about what you watched the night before. So
I particularly like that idea of just get people to say out loud why they appreciate where they work, why the company is good. Sometimes take a step back, take that reminder as to why it's good. Definitely. Simon, I can't find you on my screen at the moment, but we've got Simon with us as well. Hi, Simon. I know when we've spoken, we've talked about building those social relationships. So I wonder if there's anything you could add.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a year ago, if you'd asked me if we could actually prepare and release an annual report on time, I would have struggled to do that with my team, and actually managed to do it 2 weeks early. So, but when in trying to get everything set up with the team, I tried to think back to, well, where I used to work. I had a company based in California. I was here in the UK, had team members in Israel and Singapore. All of those interactions were remote anyway. Some of those people in California I talk to every week still. They're friends. Some of them I've met once, twice. Some of them I've never met in person. So carrying on that, thinking back to how we used to do it, and as people have said, sort of having that sort of focus, like you would pop and have a coffee in the office. I've really tried to carry that on with the team, and outside of the core annual report time, try and get at least 2 times a week that I just catch up with someone and have a coffee. and I've done it face to face. I think, and not just internally with other people. I've done it with Gareth, in fact, and just trying to keep those social relationships working. Because at the end of the day, the closer you are there, the actually more efficient the team is going to be. They know who to go to. They know who when people are available. Can they just approach them, or is it better to put something in diaries and really flex the style with what everyone actually really likes?
Definitely. And Dennis, I know you're dealing with teams that are sort of based around the world. Has there been any particular things you've tried and tested that have worked for keeping those social relationships, or perhaps with new staff building them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I certainly put a lot more thought into the methods of communication. I think one of the big challenges isn't, the format helps us in terms of leveling the playing field, but the challenge it introduces is kind of on the time zone side of things. It's difficult to include everybody across all the different time zones that you've got. So yeah, I mean, it's all about, I think the different methods. We're still experimenting. Recording, as I think CJ mentioned, is a really good one. We standard record most of our meetings just so that they can be shared. Even people that are, in the right time zone, they've got other things going on. That's kind of a benefit we never really discovered before, but because we're all online, you can record them. Looking at how things that you write up versus don't. Again, I know from my perspective, I certainly spend a lot more time thinking about communicating. I don't know about everyone else, but the amount of time I spend thinking about communication is probably going to 30-50%, because it is worried about trying to get this team and figure out how to get them working efficiently. Ultimately, it's about the team being able to do the job. I'm just setting them up to be able to do it. They actually get everything done. So, it's really focusing on how to create that environment where they can. So, yeah, a lot of thinking about how to communicate. We're experimenting. I'm certainly experimenting a lot with informal attempts to get people to communicate. I think I had some early ones that as Louise was talking about, they were a bit forced, and we had to get into a point where they were more natural. But yeah, lots of coffee mornings. I think everybody's in the same situation. Everybody actually wants to make this work. So, you need to bear that in mind as you try new things. And people are generally, open to experimentation and trying things. I think we're all craving certain elements and enjoying others. But, we're all willing to experiment. We're all in this kind of unusual situation together. So yeah, it's a lot of thinking about how to communicate and trying to set that up for the team, really.
I might just chip in here, actually, because that's quite an interesting point, Den, and just talking there about the time you're spending thinking even about communicating. Has it shifted your focus from managing things and activities to managing people?
Oh, completely, yeah. My priority before was a little bit of contributing in the right places so that I could have a significant impact on what the team was doing, and it's now much more about trying to set them up to do it. I've in many sort of ways, I've worked out the fact that I'm actually not that important other than being a coordinator. It is all about setting the team up. And you've just got to spend a lot more time on communication. We do not have those interpersonal relationships that build up such a, that make up such a component of our previous work lives. So, you've got to try to force as much communication as you can. I spend a lot of time trying to pierce the organizational boundaries as well. I talk a lot more with people, more junior people. I find that not only does that make them feel more connected, it actually makes me understand better. So kind of throwing away the traditional molds around organizational structure, we're kind of much more in it together. And as you say, I'm much more about trying to orchestrate the whole thing and make sure people are aware and coordinating.
Yeah, it's definitely, we are all in it together, and I think that's something that's always worth bearing in mind, actually, that like we're all new to this, we're all trying, there's going to be some fails, but can we make these things work together? Yeah, it's a really good point. I think It's definitely been challenging the last year. There's definitely been a lot of stuff that has been harder. There's definitely a lot of things which we have had to kind of navigate our way through, and it hasn't always gone smoothly. But as I mentioned at the start, I've actually benefited from increased engagement with my colleagues and increased opportunities throughout the last year, throughout sort of lockdown, this forced remote working. Simon, is that something that you can share your experiences around?
Yeah, I mean, within our team, we have a big financial reporting team up in Sweden from the pre the merger, and they've certainly felt that they're included more. I know there's been a few comments about mixed meetings and things, and certainly when we've had meetings before, a lot of people may be in the room but spread around places, and they are much more included now. And I hope that doesn't change. And people have made comments about mixed meetings. I think people are more open to it now, and both making sure other people are heard, but also people stepping up and raising their voice so they can be heard. And it just takes a lot more chairing of the meeting. But for me personally, there's been a few things that I've wanted to do over the last couple of years with sort of annual reports and financial reporting. That we have some obviously interesting conversations with an investor relations team. They wanted me to go out and do some of the road shows with them so that we could see how they were interacting with investors. And it was never possible. You could never find 2 days to go on a trip overseas just for a 2-hour meeting. But once everything went remote, well, it's really easy to just sit on those calls and do those. And actually doing that halfway through Q2, Q3 last year, and you see the difference in the interaction at year end made things a lot more efficient. And so it's been a massive benefit to some of my team to be able to join those, and those people that wouldn't naturally have even been picked to go on those trips, let alone find time to be able to do it, that also managed to join. It does sort of show the limit to my understanding of some of the science. So.
Thank you, Simon. Now, I know CJ has got a few questions to ask the panel, so I'm going to hand over to you if that's okay.
Of course, Crystal, thank you. So mine's to Carolyn first, if you don't mind, Carolyn. So I'm kind of touching on some of the things that we've been talking about in this call. There's a lot of new skills that people are having to level up and do things differently, and even to Simon's kind of recent point, it's just a lot of change. How are managers navigating all of that?
It's interesting. So thanks, CJ. It's interesting because in a lot of different ways, and I think probably the multitude of feedback we've had from employers and partners is that it was about their ability to do the day job and the technical side. It was actually their ability to look at what the softer skills look like, what it looked like to actually understand that somebody was trying to homeschool, they were trying to work from home, that potentially because they didn't start work at 9 and finish at 5 o'clock, what did that look like? How did they manage the expectation of the business versus the expectation of their team, which I think is a huge thing. Certainly from our side at CMI, we found working from home a really positive thing. And we started working from home probably a week before we went into lockdown. Have no intention of full-time opening either of our head offices at the moment. We've done some very innovative things like creating online Pilates classes. Not that I've had time to attend, but I'm told they're very good. As well as a Q&A session CEO every Friday, where she sits, and it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about, which was breaking down those barriers in an organisation. You know, our CEO sits there and answers questions that are scripted, and on a weekly basis we have shout outs to share the success of people, even to the point where those of us that have had our COVID vaccine, that's actually celebrated as something, you know, and shared because we choose to share it. So I think from our perspective we pivoted really well. We did an incredibly good job as an organisation to support people. Part of that was actually, I think, led by the conversations we had with our employers, because we've had examples of people who were fairly junior managers, kind of put into role, been in role maybe 6 months, and suddenly told, you've got 10 people in your team, you need to tell them all tomorrow they're going on furlough. Or worst case scenario now, you've got 10 people in your team, each of those 10 people needs to reapply for their job and 5 of them will not have a job. Now that's tough. That's tough for someone who knows what they're doing. That's tough for someone who's prepared for that. For someone who's not, that's ultra tough. The other big thing I think that we've had feedback wise in terms of managing remote teams has been about managing people's mental health and well-being. And I think that's been a really huge thing, because actually, as we all know, the last people to ask for help are probably the people who need it the most. But that's really been about trying to re-educate people to not ask people because they won't tell you, but actually, as people have said, you know, involve people in a variety of different activities. And if you sense that someone is struggling, reach out on a one-to-one basis to that person and allow them to talk. Don't necessarily ask them if there's an issue, just allow them to talk. And we have found that, you know, you get so much more from people. We've got other organisations who have done as we've done, and they actually have mental health first aiders. And there is training that those guys can go through, and we've made that recommendation to a number of very large employers that people will in confidence be able to go to this person who can't solve the problem but can signpost. It's completely confidential, can be aware, and it, you know, for me, that's not just a big thing now. The 9 to 12 months that are coming, that's going to be massive, because the fallout, I think, in terms of people's mental health will be huge. What we've done as an organisation is listen to what people have said, and created not only the qualifications and apprenticeships we do, but bite-sized programs that focus on managing change, diversity, leadership in a digital age, and actually about looking after people's mental health. So I guess that's a very long-winded way of saying that's, as an organisation, how we've personally coped and how we've personally dealt with it, but also the support that we've given the people that have come to us and asked for it as our partners.
Amazing, thank you, Carolyn. And I think, you know, one of the things that you kind of said at the start there was there's something quite strange, isn't there, about the fact that as soon as we became disconnected from each other in terms of physical presence, we really had to level up being more human. And I just think that is a lesson I hope we all kind of take forward with us into the hybrid world. And to your last point on mental health, I mean, my goodness me, if this isn't one of the biggest challenges we as organisations face now. I had a wonderful email sent to me last week where someone said, we've set up a panel of people who just reach out randomly to someone else to say, you might be someone who just needs an offload and download. I put my hand up to, I'm going to be your person. So, you know, if you just want to say nothing at all or everything, or just have someone to have verbal diarrhea with, like that, I'm up for that. So, and it was quite nice. I thought, God, that's really personal. So yeah, completely, mental health is so key, isn't it? Thank you, Carolyn.
Okay.
So in terms of kind of like the biggies with the challenges that we're all kind of looking into from our hybrid world now, Louise, I wonder if, you know, what's the stuff that, you know, well, hopefully doesn't stop you sleeping, but what do you think, blah, that feels a bit horrible and blobby?
Well, I think something that we're starting to address now, both in terms of training and, you know, really thinking about how it's going to look like in reality, is the return from furlough for a lot of people, and also the return to the physical office space. So as an organisation, we're currently in the process of working out what our agile working policy will look like. And that's going to mean different things to different people. We've certainly naturally through this lockdown period and working from home, actually been able to naturally give some people back their pre-COVID motivators, which is, I want to be able to pop out and pick up my kids from school, or I want to be able to do that. And I can't do that if I'm in an office. You have to be really careful if you're taking people back into an office environment, the impact that that will have if you're potentially taking away those things from them. So it's about how we can make this work, that people are achieving still the things that they want to in their work-life balance, and we get things back on an even keel by physically being in the same building together. So like most organisations, and from the earlier poll that you took, I can see that we're all mostly likely to have some sort of hybrid, and it's about how we ensure that people are okay with that, that they're ready for that, that particularly in the case of our organisation, which is obviously led by the pub and hospitality industry, we're going to have to ramp up. So those that have still been in the business and haven't been furloughed, making sure they're not fatigued as we start to roll things forward, and that those who are returning from furlough, we are ensuring that that is managed properly and it doesn't cause stress and anxiety on their mental health, and that they're ready to go. So we're doing lots of getting ready to return to work programs and resilience training, etc. And a lot of it will be based around, we just don't know how busy it's going to be. We're all in this together and we will get through it together. So very much reinforcing the team moment. So
yeah, perfect. And having that, you know, we've got some psychological safety here for people to be a little bit okay with the utterly ambiguous place that we're all going to be in, but we're all going to be in it together. So that makes us feel a bit more okay about it, doesn't it?
None of us have crystal balls. This is my first pandemic, as I'm sure it is for absolutely everybody else. So we all just muddled through. Did we get everything right? Probably not, but we certainly held our hands up to what we didn't get right, and we said, okay guys, you know, I learned something from the way I furloughed people. I did too long a chunks, so I learned to do it on a rotational basis this third lockdown, and that's had a positive benefit. So I had to stand up to the business and say, no, we're not doing that this time, we're going to do it this way.
Nice one, well played, Louise.
Thanks.
And I think it's one of those things, and kind of touching on, there's always this kind of concern about two-tier workforce that we have now emerging out of this, and furlough was a big part to play in that. I know we've spoken to some businesses where some of their working employees that weren't furloughed, like who were their star players, starting to feel a bit resentful about actually how much kind of them they feel has been consumed over this period. So it's such a balance for all of us, for sure. Thanks, Louise. So I guess one of the things that I want to ask is to Dennis really is, what is the future of hybrid teams? What excites you about the art of the possible when we've got hybrid that we're all looking down the barrel of now?
If I knew the answer to that.
You must do, I'm sure.
It's the $1 million question. I mean, I think, you know, the phrases that are going around at the moment, it sounds like a lot of us are sharing, which is, you know, it's not going to go back to the way it was before. What it's going to be, nobody really knows, but it sounds like, you know, from what Louise and others were saying, you know, the best you can do is kind of feel your way through it, keep your ears open and listen to people and see what they say. I mean, there's some really positive things that I really hope don't go from this. I mean, one of them was one you mentioned, which is, I suddenly see people as humans. You know, the barrier between the professional facades that, you know, we're expected to uphold and who we really are. You know, I'm seeing it in everybody's world. I've got, you know, one of my extended team, he's got his kids crawling over him during half the meetings, and you have to go, listen, you've got a life, that's the priority, go, you know, go take care of that. And, you know, when here in the UK, when the schools didn't, you know, when the schools were shut down early in the year, that was a real stress. You suddenly had people trying to be teachers, parents, and workers all in the same chair. And, you know, you had to realize that. And I now see people as people. I hope that stays. You know, we are allowed to be human a bit more, which is a positive thing. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I hope stays with us. You know, a lot of, in particular for me, a lot of the younger people, you know, they were already kind of questioning, why do I have to be in this office environment? This isn't where I can do my best work. This isn't what makes me feel positive and motivated. So, you know, that's a good thing. And I think everybody's going to have a different view on it. So, you know, we're going to have to be flexible, not just as an organization, but almost down to an individual level. And I think, you know, hopefully we can bring all that, but there's certainly going to be some challenges I just don't have the answer to. You know, this them versus us, in and out type thing, that's going to be quite real. If I had the answer to that, I would be making money doing services at the moment. If anybody does, you know.
I've seen some surveys recently suggesting that actually younger staff are the ones who do want to be in. They want the social aspect, they want the mentoring, they've often not got great working situations at home. So whereas, you know, maybe older people who have childcare responsibilities, you know, more complicated personal situations, perhaps value that flexibility of working at home. So yeah, it's very challenging.
Can I also add as well, one thing we're also very wary of is allowing everybody to work from home on the same day, such as a Friday, which was traditionally a socialisation after work day. And we do fear that we will naturally lose that natural, let's pop to the pub after work thing. So we're thinking about, do we need to make conscious efforts to change what we do with that?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Sorry, when are we going to the pub, Louise?
I'll send you the list. You know where's open.
So there's like, I don't know how many people on this Zoom call will all go to the pub, right? So thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand back either to Crystal or Gareth now, and thank you very much for kind of going through those questions with me to our panel.
Fascinating. No, that's really great. And actually, can I invite the four panelists? Are there any sort of final comments that you haven't already raised? Are there any observations, say, Simon, that you've actually picked up from other people chatting today?
I think it's going to be different for everyone. We're not going to have got things perfect. So there's actually some sort of ideas that I'll probably reflect on after this and see if there's some changes I can make, because we're not going to have, we didn't anyway have everyone in every day, even prior to the pandemic. We don't have the space, but trying to build on ways that teams can interact the best going forward, it's going to be interesting.
Definitely. Den, Louise, you got any final comments?
I had another learning. I don't mind sharing where I've made my mistakes over this process, which was, and this is just says more about me, which is when things were quieter, I took that mindset of, well, what an excellent opportunity to do some tidying up work, things that we've always, you know, have been sort of never making the top of the to-do list previously. And actually, you know, too much of that is a demotivator for the team. You need to try, in my now experience, to stick as closely as possible to the team's core purpose. It's a bit like making someone file day in, day out. It's boring and it's not motivational at all. So it can scream at you, oh, an excellent opportunity to get things done, but don't. And just find that right balance would be a learning I've made.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about this is just it kind of puts it in context that a lot of people are going through the same thing. You know, it can be easy to sit there and think that I'm the only one trying to wrestle with these problems. And it kind of reminds you that you know, that we're all in this together. It's something we're all kind of, and it's okay to experiment and make mistakes. And it's good to share. So yeah, that's quite refreshing.
Fantastic. And Carolyn, from your perspective, anything that you're sort of seeing from this discussion?
I think Dennis just stole mine, actually, which was we're all in this together, and we're none of us going to get it right first time. And actually having a forum like this to have a conversation where we can put our hands up and say, we're not going to get it right all the time, but actually that was a really good idea. We can take that back. Conversations like this are massively important, but the realization that we're not always going to get it right, but we just have to keep trying. So yeah, that's kind of mine, I think.
Fantastic. And a lovely segue into the fact that this is the first of a series of, we're planning to run these sessions monthly to keep on top of hot topics. I suspect remote/hybrid working will be one we will return to, but our next session next month, Crystal, I don't know if you've got the details to share, but we're going to be looking at resilience, which I think is an ongoing topic for an awful lot of ourselves. You know, I found this third lockdown so much harder than the previous ones, actually, personally. And actually now my daughters are at school. That's great in some respects from a focus perspective, but God, am I lonely now being at home all of the time. So, you know, I think personal resilience is so important, but also for the teams, going back to actually Den's point around, you know, management is about focusing more on the people around you rather than on yourself. So we do have a session coming up next month where we'll have a similar format with some panelists and some speakers. I think Crystal's just sharing that, but our plan is to circulate the recording of this. I know some people couldn't attend live, and you may have colleagues who will find the output from this interesting. So we're going to circulate the recording plus a bit of a summary of some of the key points that have been raised, and we'll make sure that there's a link to that next session in April, but we are planning to do these on a monthly basis just to keep that conversation going. As we've said, we are all, I think, learning this together, and thank you so much everyone for your contribution through the chat box. I think we're going to have learned as much from the chat box today as we probably have from our excellent speakers. So thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your time today to join us, and I would really love to thank so Simon from AstraZeneca, Den from ARM, Louise from Green King, Carolyn from the CMI, and CJ, who has sort of co-hosted with Crystal, and a big thank you as well to Crystal for helping put this together. I hope everyone has taken something useful away from that, and I hope you've had an enjoyable session with us today. But enjoy the rest of your weeks, and I hope we will see you in the near future. Be useful if you want to make any comments in the chat box as you're collecting your coats and heading off. But thank you for your time, and see you all soon.